and welcome to a new video. I had my thoughts on what to make as nothing after the Mama Awards particularly piqued my interest, but then today when I woke up, when this script is being written, I saw a post of XG. And if you don't know XG, they are a global group, though they do sometimes promote on Korean music shows based in Japan. And the post I have seen was of XG's Cocona, who came out as non-binary trans masculine, which we will return to later. But it inspired me to talk about queer K-pop, queer baiting in K-pop, and yet the homophobia in South Korea that is very prevalent and the way these idols possibly are. Without further ado, I do want to get started. A brief history of K-pop. So the first K-pop song, as I assume many of you know, as it is in 1001 K-pop trivia, is cited as I Know by Seo Taiji, or Taiji, and the Boys, released in 1992. In 1992, South Korea was less of a technological giant than it is today. Not that it was not, but its soft power, the thing that most represents it today, was definitely not what it was currently. Soft power, if you don't know, is the ability to influence other nations' perception of yourself, or in this case your nation, by creating a product that is benevolent. It definitely has a better sociological definition, but in the context of this particular video, this is what you must know. Or if you follow sociology, it is the cultural capital or even symbolic capital that one possesses. That can, but does not necessarily have to translate into financial capital in order for it to be soft power, which is pure Bordeaux, if you care about that. However, South Korea, while conservative even today, which we will get into later as well, back then was even more so of a conservative country. As far as I look, there was no mention of first-gen K-pop queer idols or even anything toying with the idea, at least not until second generation. First queer person from the late first gen or early second gen that debuted was Harisu, or Lee Kyung-gun, who debuted in 2001, originally under TTM Entertainment. She was the first Korean entertainer who came out as transgender, and one of the first in Korea in general to change their gender through surgery and hormones. Another notable and much more famous example in the same vein is the group Lady, that debuted in 2005 under Logai Entertainment. And they were the first all transgender group. It consisted of 4 members, 4 transgender ladies, and while they disbanded only 2 short years after debut in 2007, it was a notable project for the time. Also in 2007, so same year, Maman, or back then Magolpai, or Magolpi, however you pronounce it, I apologize, debuted. She debuted under Jerry Entertainment, however was quickly dropped after coming out as a lesbian in an interview. Her company did attempt to play off her coming out as a joke, however she refused and thus she was dropped. In 2012 she released an album without a label, but in 2015 she was picked up by a different label, though I could not find for the life of me which one, and released a song called Obvious Story about a lesbian relationship, which is the first song we know confirmed about queer relationships by a queer person. And we slowly transition into the third gen and our perhaps most famous example, Holland, who is the first male openly gay idol. He debuted in 2018 as an independent artist, and even his debut song Neverland explores gay romance. Strangely, while Holland was not received well by everyone, he is still active to this day, which is very impressive for an independent queer artist in South Korea, though I do think he is loved by an international fan base. I do think he has a strong fan base. A few more artists came out later on, Sungho and Beanish, who were in Dip, a group that debuted in 2016, and after they left the group, they confirmed they were in a same-sex relationship together. And Jia, a former member of the girl group What's Up, came out as bisexual in 2020, and is currently very open about her relationship with a woman. However, I do think it is notable to mention that the correlation of the imaginary graph, so if you think we have the graph out here, that only more nugu or smaller idols and artists dare to come out, probably due to, in the ways of the public and the contracts, less pressure. Obviously, all K-pop idols are under basically slave contracts, but I do think that Nugu stands have way less to lose. There is way less money on the line, they are in debt in general, and why would they not come out to their loyal fan base? Strangely enough, when we look at 4th gen, there are only 2 examples, so it seems like the 3rd gen was the biggest boom. It could be either because there is now tighter control around these idols, or because most of them are still active, and a lot of these coming out stories were post-disbandment, so perhaps that is the reason. Just B's Bane, who openly came out as gay during this year's concert in 2025, and Cherry, which is a former member of the boy group Jeever, or JWII Ver, however you pronounce it, once again I apologize, came out as transgender also in 2025. So like I said, it could be the thing that perhaps after disbandment these people feel comfortable enough, or there is not as much at stake to come out. And in 5th gen, the only example is the group She X, or QI.X, which is an openly queer and transgender group. Now, here I might see you or hear you over the keyboard asking, well, where is X-Love? Which smoothly transitions us into the next topic. Queerbaiting in K-pop. The definition of queerbaiting is a marketing tactic where the creator hints at the same-sex attraction or LGBTQ plus themes in characters to attract queer audiences, but never actually show or confirm their relationship, often dropping hits for subtext without providing meaningful representation, leaving fans feeling teased, exploited, unfulfilled, rather than offering genuine inclusion. It's a way to get attention and sales from queer fans without committing to depicting actual queer stories, sometimes leading to tragic stereotypes or no payoff at all. That is the definition of queerbaiting provided by my dear friend Wikipedia, but you more or less know what it was, even if you did not know the definition. Now, before you jump at me, I'm not saying that X-Love is necessarily queerbaiting. X-Love is engaging with their very queer audience and have debuted under a genderless concept. But it is important to say that the CEO of their entertainment, 257 Entertainment, made it a point to clarify that the members do not identify as genderless, it is just a concept. However, to defend X-Love, as this topic is not necessarily for them, but I use them as a mouthpiece for snaking in the topic, X-Love do generally create a positive community for their queer fans. And while they themselves could be queer or aren't queer, we don't know, the fact alone that they accept to work with concepts they are given shows, if nothing else, a dose of healthy masculinity. In this section, I wanted to more refer to queerbaiting that even big companies dip their toes into, that I think every company does. The overuse of skinship or excessive touching when none of it is necessary, playing into the fans' ships for the idols and the fans' delusion, making the idol both seem to be dating the fan and dating the member they are assigned. For female idols, it is even worse in the sense that the overt touching, sometimes even with a lightly sexual connotation. For example, Irene and Solgi in both of their songs, both in Monster and the recent one. Not that I do think they could necessarily be queerbaiting for this exact reason. I think they more lean into the first reason, which is queerbaiting for their female audience, but they are a good example, can be made with the benefit of exciting the male clientele. Also, what used to be a very popular tactic was to create one masculine member of a K-pop group, a girl group specifically, and make them the designated guy to be shipped with. So think FX's Amber or Twice's Jonghyun in the early days. It is not only deceptive to fans, but many of those masculine idols express distaste for the roles they were forced in. Twice's Jonghyun, for example, mentioned hating it multiple times, wishing to be feminine like the rest of her members. It does lean onto the topic that everyone kind of pretends doesn't exist, often child predatory nature of the idol industry, and fulfilling that role for the viewer. In general, 15, 16, and 17-year-olds, but ultimately even adults who do look younger and engage with such behavior, and adding queerbaiting on top of the list. There is the argument I am certain someone made, which is real people cannot queerbait, as queerbaiting is often used as a term for television series and shows. However, considering that the K-pop industry is built on wishing the viewer was or has a parasocial relationship with the idol, I kind of disagree. The industry wants you to trust the idol like a friend, and in the most skimmed down and honestly irrelevant argument, but we can still make it for the sake of making it, it is a friend lying to you. And in the much broader terms, using some characteristics of the marginalized group while the group's treatment in your country is abysmal, is much worse. I do also want to mention the heavily queer-leaning songs, like, for example, Idol's Oh My God, or songs made by X-Love, which we don't know the sexuality of these idols. So they could as well be making representation. But the issue is, it's not that I doubt it, it's just that the card of, well, they might be queer, so we cannot judge them, is a get out of jail free card, and not a good thing to support an argument with. Leads us into the final section, which is homophobia in South Korea. We all know that South Korea is a very conservative country, both very sexist, racist, and homophobic in most of its laws. Though there have been minor improvements since the 2010s, same-sex intercourse is legal, but in the military, and we all know because of K-pop that the military is mandatory, it is a crime to have gay sex in the military. Also, there are no laws against discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity, and no same-sex marriages or even civil unions are recognized by their law, even if made in a different country. Same-sex couples can adopt children, and a 2021 Human Rights Watch investigation found that queer students face discrimination and bullying, albeit bullying in South Korea is an issue for everyone. I also do want to mention, which I found, is South Korea is deemed a developed democracy, yet is one of only 3 countries that are also deemed developed democracies that got an F rating on the 2019 Franklin and Marshall Global Barometer of Gay Rights, which basically means their treatment of queer people is shit. Transgender people are allowed to change their sex, undergo operation, or even change it on legal documents, like Harisu, who I mentioned earlier. Prior to 2003, homosexuality was classified as harmful and obscene, which is just insane, though not uncommon. And unfortunately, people in the country do often have that attitude. The only positives South Korea have legally are the recognition of trans people and the fact that homosexuality is not illegal. But you must agree with me that those are not nearly progressive laws or opinions, just basic not harming someone, barely. Which makes the entire topic of our video all the more despicable. In conclusion, while I am certain that there are progressive South Koreans, or that there is a possibility that some of these queer-baiting idols may be truly queer, it is still a practice that is too widespread. Especially since in every country, the entertainment industry is most liberal, most scandalous. It's just the law of nature, where there is money, fame, and people who have to be at least inherently lightly self-centered in order to be celebrities. There are many more miles to go, but we are rounding back to Cocona or idols like Holland or Harisu, who do still push the line forward despite the fact that they are certainly aware of the challenges they will face. It is an incredibly brave thing to do, and in every way it is something that most of us should do, especially in this new wave of a global conservative pandemic. It was all I initially intended to say for this video, so thank you for spending your time with me, and I will see you in the next one.